Hi, I'm Mark with Macroscopic Solutions, and today I'm going to be talking about assembling the MicroCore system. So the MicroCore system is very similar to the Macrocore system, but instead of larger materials, more macro materials, we're going to be photographing much smaller materials. So things that are on the order of microns up to about 4 centimeters. And it's ideal for photographing stalactites, small basically metalworkings, threads, or in this case what we're going to be photographing are tree cores. And tree cores, as you know, are going to go right through the width of any trunk of a tree, so they come in various shapes and sizes. This is a fairly small one, but they can come into several meters in size. So we offer the sliders in a variety of lengths from 1 meter all the way up to 2.5 meters. This system here is sitting at 1.5 meters. So what I'm going to do is show you how to install this system, and then in a second video I'll show you how to use it. For this, there's two different lenses. There's the MPE65, which is for 1 to 5x, magnification, and typically that's used for subjects around 2 millimeters up to 4 centimeters. The micro kit and the objectives are used for much smaller materials. So because it's a little bit more challenging, we're going to start with the 70 to 200 with the objective and show you how that's done, because then the MPE65 is pretty intuitive once you have that figured out. Okay, so just to jump right into this, this is basically your y-axis servo. It's what generates the panoramic images that moves down the slider. So what we have here is an RS adapter plate with 2 screws, an external battery which is mounted to the controller adapter, and this gets situated directly on the carriage. So for this, you're going to use a 1/8 Allen to actually go ahead and torque these screws into place. Now, it's really important not to over torque any of the screws on this system. They don't need a lot of compression in order to hold them in place. They're machine screws and they're tapered. So generally everything that you mount on here, you just need basically just 2 fingers, a gentle hand turn, and still it starts to firm up, and that's plenty of torque for any bolt on this system. You can see how snug that is. That's already built in place. Now, the next component that we're going to set up is basically an adapter. There's 2 screws, and what the adapter is designed to do is hold the tripod in place. So the tripod is the standard ground tripod that we use in all of our systems. And if you're not familiar with it, what it does is these arms extend and they lock every 30 degrees. Once it's locked, you can't actually engage the release mechanism. You have to push it in a little bit and then you can engage it. So for this, what you want to do is actually push the release mechanism, and you want to come all the way out, and you want to do that with all 3 legs, because this system's going to sit level. You don't need the front leg. That's where it's going to mount to the adapter. You're going to slide that out and you're just going to put that to the side. So again, don't over torque anything. You're just going to slide this into the adapter, and you're just going to gently have it so that it sits in there snug, and that will be pretty tight even with very little pressure. Now, depending on what you're imaging, it's best probably just to put the tripod somewhere in the middle of the slider system. So in this case, we have a pretty small tree core. We're just going to put it in the middle. It also forms as a pretty solid base. That means the slider's not going to be bouncing up and down. It's actually going to lock it in a position. It keeps the whole thing a little bit more rigid, especially if you're in a room that's susceptible to vibrations. These 2 tapered Allens are just going to be used to secure the adapter into place. And you're going to use a 3/16 Allen to just tighten these down. Again, doesn't take much torque, just very gentle until the thing is situated firm. So we'll get those positioned. Now, the reason why this system's a little different than the MacroCore is because we're moving a sample relative to the camera. And for this, a lot of the lighting is going to be staying stationary with the camera as opposed to being moved with the specimen. And that's just because there's so much travel that we don't want any variation in lighting as you move down your sample. So as I mentioned, we have 2 different lenses to choose from. 1 to 5x for larger materials, the 70 to 200 for much smaller materials. Your stack shot is going to be mounted directly onto where the controller is. You just want to basically mount it directly to the adapter and slide it forward so that it doesn't come into contact with your controller. Now, the way we've modified the stage here, it has two Allens that clamp down and then secure the tree core or whatever your sample is in place. And so basically I'll show you how to do that later, but we're just going to go ahead and install this directly into the adapter. There it is. Just make sure the back of the servo is clear of where the controller is going to sit. The next thing that we're going to install is a new slide adapter. What that slide adapter does is it sets up a new ring that we're incorporating into this system, which keeps your lighting in a more stationary location, but also in an ideal location so that you're still using a great deal of light diffusion, especially with the microscopic photography. It's even more important. So, there are two ways to do this. When you're using the MPE65, what you would like to do is have the ring, which we're going to mount on here. I'll just show it to you now. You want to have the ring situated behind the camera body and the camera and the lens up front. And that's just because you need to set up an ideal working distance. When you're using the micro kit, the working distance is a bit longer. So for that case, what you want to do is you want to position the ring so that it's on the front of this rail. So what we're going to do is just take this rail system, we're going to mount it into the adapter and clamp it. There it is, it's snug. And now we're going to take the adapter, which our camera is going to sit on, and we're going to move it to the back. Then we're going to take your lens, mount it on the smaller adapter, and that's going to keep everything snug. And there's still a bit of travel there, so you can actually move your lens to and from down that slider. Now, the ring adapter, like I said, is going to be mounted on the front of the camera for these optics. Using the MPE65, you're going to reverse everything. It's going to go on the back. Just something to keep in mind. So we're just going to loosen up that mount, slide it on, and lock it down. Okay, so since we're not using this lens, I'm just going to put it to the side. There are two arms. Each of these arms is going to be positioned right into one of these mounts. These are what's going to be responsible for extending out your flash heads. There's three camera bodies that you can choose from with this system. There's the EOS R, which is mirrorless, which we don't advise because it's very susceptible to dust, which is bad for panoramic photography and focus stacking. There's a 6D Mark II. It's 28 megapixels. It's a great camera, especially if you're concerned with workflow. And there's also the 5DSR. The 5DSR is a very, very large camera sensor. It's 52 megapixels. It's more ideal for printing. But your workflow is not going to be as fast because it's going to slow down your processing times. So, when removing dust caps, be very quick, but then again be gentle with the camera. You don't want to drop it, but the idea is to not get any dust into the back of the camera body. So just set the dust caps aside. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the flash. Each flash head is already equipped with an adapter that's going to allow you to mount it directly to these arms. And now you have a platform where these actually rotate, they move. You can actually move them all the way around the ring, but in this situation, you're just going to keep them both towards the top. And we can go ahead and do that now. Okay. The next thing that we could do is set up the external battery pack. So the external battery pack is designed to basically allow the flash to recharge faster, and it also holds a better charge. Because you're going to be taking a lot of photographs with this system, you want an external battery pack. We give you an external charger to charge all these batteries. Whenever you want to set it up, what you can do is just take one of these arms here, and you could just tighten it and secure it down to one of these legs so that it's out of the way and not a bother to you. Just go ahead and trigger that light real quick. Okay, it's back. And then what you're going to do is take the cable, and it's going to plug directly into the side of the flash. Okay, so that's all set up. Now we want to install our cables and the controller. The controller is going to mount directly onto that adapter. You can take the external battery and go ahead and plug that into the power section on the StackShot controller. You have your 4-pin motor cables. What we're going to do is take the X axis of motion, and that's going to go into your servo that drives stacking. So that's your StackShot. And then the entire sliding unit is going to mount directly into the Y-axis. So we're going to plug that in. The next thing we have is your remote shutter cable. So the remote is going to plug directly into your camera, and that's what's going to allow the computer to synchronize with the camera shutter. Now what you can do is just power on the StackShot and make sure that everything is functional. So it's already set up to the X-axis. What we can do is just move the X-axis and make sure that the sample moves. It does, that's all set up. Change it over to the Y, and now we can actually move the carriage down the slider. Alright, and so now you just want to connect the USB cable to the camera to the computer. So you have a 6-foot cable here. You're just going to take the mini USB, plug that into the port, and then the other USB, unplug this into the port. So the last step is to now mount your specimen. So we're going to take our tree core, and you're just going to set it on the stage. Now, when you do set this up to take an image, what you want to do is you want to make sure that the front surface is completely perpendicular with the optics on the camera. So what you can do is actually just focus on one side and then focus on the other side until you get the same area in focus, and now you know that when you travel down along the Y-axis, that the stack is going to go through the same section of material every time. So what we can do now is tighten that down just to make sure you don't accidentally bump it or risk hurting the sample in any way. So you're just going to take an Allen key and you're just going to gently compress the core so that now it's on there pretty snug. The next thing you want to do is go ahead and set up your objective. So we're going to take our adapter. You're going to take off the lens cap on the 70-200, and this is just going to screw directly onto the front of the lens. And then we're going to take a microscope objective and we're going to screw that directly into that adapter. In this case, again, we're going to use the 20x objective. You can use any objective with this system. 20x is a very good one in terms of most of the materials that people are looking at. So always keep a hand on this objective. You don't want to drop it under any circumstances. It's very susceptible to shock. You can mess up the optics and you'll ultimately have to replace it if it's dropped. You use 2 hands to thread it into the adapter. Be sure not to cross thread, just very, very gentle until it's in all the way. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your diffuser. Sometimes these O-rings, they start to expand a little bit in transit. You just want to make sure it's in there and allows you to mount the diffuser onto the front. So that's a walkthrough, a complete walkthrough of the entire setup and configuration of how you want to set everything up, which isn't too difficult or intensive. If you have this set up, you can leave it set up. Anything that's going to be susceptible to dust is pretty much covered by an adapter or something else. So it's okay to leave it out, leave it set up like this. just key to remember that when you have the 1-5x lens, you just reverse where this ring is. The ring's just going to go behind the camera, camera's going to go up front. That's just to set up a more ideal working distance. You can still edit and adjust working distance quite a lot just by moving where the camera is on the slider. So what you can do is loosen it up and then ultimately move everything forward. You can move your sample forward, and you can end up getting a lot more or less travel as you need it for this. You can move, again, your slider forward. And we can keep bringing it forward as we need it. There we go. So the next steps then, what I'm going to show you how to do in the second video outside of setup is now bring your subject material into focus, set it up for imaging, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take a series of images and then bring this core into focus and generate a panoramic. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much for watching the setup video, and thank you as always for choosing Macroscopic Solutions.